right, so we're back for another deep dive. Chapter 10. And this is where things start to get really real for our characters.
Yeah, no kidding. We're going down into the lighthouse basement with Graham, Mayoli, and Tyfanna,
That's right.
and each of them has had like a really unique journey to get to this point.
They really have. And it's all about the choices, right? That's what this game is all about. But before we get too deep into Chapter 10, I think it would be helpful to do a quick recap of where each character stands.
Yeah, definitely.
Starting with Graham. He's our logician.
Exactly. If there's a spreadsheet to be made or a plan to be hatched, Graham's your guy.
Absolutely. Always analyzing, strategizing.
Wants to understand every single thing before he even takes a step.
But even he's starting to realize that this island, like, it's operating on a whole different set of rules.
Right. From the beginning, his journey has been all about maintaining control. That really shows you what kind of character he is.
Yeah.
He's not going to get swept away by his emotions or fear or anything like that. He's relying on his logic, on reason. That's what he believes in.
But this island, it almost feels like it's trying to break him.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's messing with his sense of order. Like I can make sense of this if I just think about it hard enough.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we've got Graham. What about Mayoli? How's her journey been so far?
Well, she's been really fascinating because with her, it's this constant dance between being pragmatic and trusting her intuition. She's kind of had to learn to balance those two things. So she starts out cautious, like very focused on just surviving, but as she starts to encounter all these weird island mysteries, she's got to rely more and more on her gut feeling.
Especially when the logical approach just doesn't cut it anymore.
Totally. And, she's been really suspicious of Tyfanna pretty much from the get-go.
Which is interesting because Tyfanna, I mean, her journey is like the most, I don't know, the most unpredictable.
Oh, yeah. She's the wild card for sure.
Right from the start, she's pulled into the island's web. Those whispers, the branding, it's like, it's got a hold of her.
It really does feel that way. And she's so susceptible to it way more than the others.
And it's tough to see, her own agency kind of slipping away.
It's almost like watching somebody get hypnotized.
Yeah, exactly. But even when she seems completely controlled, there have been these flashes of her old self.
Right. It's not totally gone.
Like when she tried to tell Graham about the voices, it's like she's fighting back, but the island's pull is just too strong.
Exactly. Which makes everything that happens in Chapter 10 so much more intense. Because they reach the lighthouse, finally. A symbol of hope, maybe some answers, and the first thing we notice is this huge change in Tyfanna.
It's like she's been, I don't know, like reset or something. The voices are silent, the compass is still, and she's just eerily calm.
Yeah. Not a good calm either, Like something's off.
Oh, for sure. It's unsettling, especially for Graham and Mayoli. They've seen how the island manipulates to this sudden shift. It throws everything off.
Absolutely. Whatever trust they had, it was already hanging by a thread. Now they don't even know who this new Tyfanna is.
And then they start to descend into the basement, and the whole atmosphere, it just gets heavier.
It's like the island itself is closing in on them.
There's this, like, blue light coming from the walls.
Ooh, creepy.
Like the island's presence is in the very structure of the lighthouse.
Right.
And Tyfanna's reaction to it, it's chilling. She doesn't seem scared at all, no revulsion. She's almost drawn to it.
Yeah. That's a big red flag. It's not just manipulation anymore. There's something deeper going on there, a connection she has with the island.
Like she recognizes something in that blue light.
Almost like a sense of familiarity or comfort even. And then they reach the bottom of the stairs and
Wow.
they walk into this huge chamber carved out of black stone.
I'm picturing it now. Dark, cold.
And there's this altar in the center.
Of course there is. What is it about islands and altars?
But it's not even the altar that's the most disturbing part. It's what's on it.
Oh, man, here we go. This is where it gets really creepy.
These figures, they're just frozen there like statues.
Frozen how? Like posed? Or...
Well, some of them are contorted, like they're in agony. But others, they have this look of like almost ecstasy on their faces.
Whoa. That's a huge contrast.
Yeah.
That tells you something right there. The island, it's not just about power. It's about duality. It can inflict pain, but it can also offer some kind of twisted pleasure. And what's Tyfanna doing this whole time? She seems to understand something the others don't. It's like she's seeing more than just frozen figures.
Uh-oh. That can't be good. She's in on something. Or something's in on her.
And that's where the chapter leaves us, right? With these 4 options. Examine the altar, inspect the markings on the ground, touch one of the figures, or run.
4 very different ways to deal with the unknown. So let's put ourselves in the player's shoes for a second. If you were controlling Graham, the
Hmm.
logician, what would your first instinct be?
He'd probably be drawn to the altar, right?
Oh,
Trying to analyze it, looking for clues that might explain the figures, the island's power, all of it.
yeah, that's definitely his style. Look for a pattern, try to make sense of it all.
But would he touch one of the figures? I don't know. That seems pretty risky, even for someone who wants to understand everything.
True. But Graham's logic has been put to the test this whole game. He's starting to realize that reason alone might not be enough to get him off this island alive.
That's a good point. So maybe he would take the risk. Okay, what about Mayoli? What would she do? Would she trust her intuition and go for the markings?
That's a tough one. Because Mayoli's intuition has been a pretty reliable guide so far. But now there's this added layer of distrust with Tyfanna.
Right, because her whole thing is that she's been wary of Tyfanna from the very beginning.
Exactly. And now, with this sudden change, that suspicion would only intensify.
So if I were controlling Mayoli, I'd be totally torn. I'd want to know what's going on with Tyfanna, but at the same time, I'd have this feeling like I need to protect myself. Something isn't right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The markings might offer some clues, but anything else getting closer to those figures, or even the altar, feels dangerous.
The island plays with your perceptions. It can control what you do.
Yeah.
So trusting anybody, even someone you thought was an ally, is a huge gamble in this place. And then there's Tyfanna. She's the big question mark.
Right. What's she thinking?
Yeah.
Is this newfound calm real, or is it something else entirely?
Hard to say. Is it a break from the island's control? Or is it like a deeper level of control that we haven't even seen before?
Oh, that's creepy.
Right. Like, what if she's become a conduit for the island's power?
And we're the ones stuck in the basement with her.
Exactly.
I'd be watching her every move, looking for any sign of her old self,
Right.
Like, does she hesitate? Is she scared of this place at all?
Does she have any opinions about these options? Or is she just going along with whatever Graham and Mayoli decide?
Because that would tell us a lot, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. If she suddenly wants to run, that might mean she's trying to fight the island's influence.
But if she's drawn to those figures, or the altar,
That could mean she's even more connected to the island's power than we thought.
and that's not good at all.
No, not good at all.
And then there's that fourth option, just turn around and run. Get out of there.
The classic fight or flight response.
But would any of them actually choose that?
It all depends on how far they've come, how much they think they understand about what's happening.
Right. Like Graham, Mr. Logic, he might consider it if he thinks it's the only way to gain control of the situation, or at least get more information.
But he's so curious, he wants answers, so that might override his fear.
What about Mayoli?
I think she's more likely to choose flight, especially with Tyfanna being so unpredictable now. If her intuition is telling her danger,
Yeah.
she's probably going to listen to it.
And Tyfanna. It all depends on what's happened to her, right?
Yeah. If she's actually free from the island, running would be the smart move.
But if she's become part of the island's power.
She might not even see it as a threat. She might want to stay down there, explore even deeper into this whole creepy situation.
So we've got these four options, all representing different ways of approaching the unknown.
And these three characters, each with their own baggage, their own trust issues, their own suspicions.
And it all comes to a head in this one chapter.
It's like a pressure cooker. And the island's turned up the heat.
Out of all of this, what really gets me is the altar and those figures.
Yeah, that's some heavy imagery.
Like the game is giving us this peek behind the curtain, showing us what happens if you let the island take over.
And the contrast between the agony and the ecstasy, that's really interesting. It
Yeah.
shows you that the island isn't just about dominating you. It's about offering you something.
Like a twisted kind of reward.
Exactly. You surrender completely and you get something. But what is that something? And is it worth the price?
All right, welcome back to the deep dive, everybody. Today, we're going to be diving into Chapter 10 of Survive the Islands. You don't belong here, right? Things get really intense for Andrea, Chris, and Jordan.
Yeah, this chapter is really fascinating. You know what gets me is how these characters really have to they have to confront the consequences of their choices, especially when it comes to how they've dealt with the island's power. Which is really interesting because remember back in chapter 7 when Andrea jumped into that glowing pool?
Oh, right. That was big. That was a huge turning point for her. It was almost like she tapped into something powerful, like she became a part of the island itself.
Exactly. The glowing pool, it's like the source of all this mystical energy on the island, right? And Andrea's decision to jump in, it created this deep connection between her and that power.
Yeah.
So I mean, it just adds a whole other layer of meaning to the conflict.
Wow. Okay. So the location itself is almost like it's like another character in this whole drama. It's not just a random backdrop. It's this place of power, and it's probably gonna have a huge impact on how this whole confrontation plays out.
Exactly. And each character arrives at this location carrying the weight of their past decisions, right? So let's start with Andrea. Her story up to this point has been about independence and embracing the unknown.
Yeah. Even in the very beginning, she was the one who was, she was questioning everything. Remember when they first found this shipwreck? She was the only one who hesitated, almost like she could sense the danger lurking beneath the surface.
That hesitation, it speaks to a core element of her character.
Right.
It's like a willingness to challenge assumptions and to kind of forge her own path, and it's that independent spirit that leads her to the glowing pool, which ultimately gives her access to the island's power.
It's interesting though because the way she uses that power, it feels so different from how Chris is using it. Hers feels almost natural. Like it flows from the island itself,
Yeah.
while his just seems so forced, almost like he's trying to like bend the island to his will.
That's a great observation, and it gets to the heart of their conflict. It describes Andre's power as being in harmony with the island, while Chris's power is extracted as if he's draining the island for his own personal gain. And this distinction is crucial because it suggests that their approaches to power are fundamentally at odds with each other.
Okay, so while Andrea's story is all about embracing the unknown and finding power in connection with the island, Chris's path has been much different, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. Chris's story is about ambition and control. From the very beginning, he's totally fixated on being the last one standing, on outwitting everyone else. He's not content with just surviving, you know. He wants to dominate
And that's what leads him to accept that crystal gift, right?
without fully understanding the consequences. And this seems to be what gives him access to this darker, more aggressive form of power.
And it's not just the way he uses the power that's different, it's also how he interacts with others. He manipulates Jordan using his fear and desperation to turn him into an ally, almost like a tool to be wielded against Andrea.
And that speaks to a crucial difference between Andrea and Chris.
Right.
Andrea's choices, even when they're risky, are driven by a desire to understand and connect with the island. Chris, on the other hand, he sees the island and everyone on it as pawns to be used in his quest for dominance.
Right, okay. That brings us to Jordan. Poor Jordan. He's been trying to play it safe this whole time, but it seems like that strategy has kind of backfired in a major way.
Jordan's story it's fascinating because it highlights the dangers of inaction. His initial caution is understandable.
Right.
Remember his very first choice in the game, way back in chapter 1, when he encountered that shadowy figure. He
Yeah.
chose to just silent observe instead of confronting it. He's constantly assessing threats, trying to, minimize risk.
But it seems like all that caution has led him into a corner where he's forced to make a choice he never wanted to make, accepting power from Chris. And now he's stuck in this alliance, caught between his own desire for safety and this unsettling realization of what this power is actually doing to him.
Exactly. And what's tragic about Jordan is that his attempt to avoid making the wrong choice has actually led him into a situation where he's lost control. He's forced to betray his own nature just to survive. And that internal struggle, that's what makes his character so compelling in chapter 10. He's not just a pawn in Chris's game. He's a complex character grappling with the consequences of choices he never intended to make.
It sounds like we've got a classic showdown brewing here. Andrea, the island's champion, representing a more natural connection to power. Chris, the ambitious manipulator, wielding a darker, more aggressive form of energy. And Jordan, the cautious soul trapped in the middle, forced to pick a side.
Yeah, and the confrontation itself, which takes place at the top of this glowing waterfall, it becomes a battle not just for survival, but for the very soul of the island. It's this clash of ideologies of different approaches to power, and the outcome, it's going to have far-reaching consequences for everyone.
Okay, so we've set the scene. We know the players, we know their motivations and the powerful location where this all takes place. So now let's dive into the action. How does this conflict actually play out?
Oh, get ready for a wild ride because things are about to get really, really intense. The chapter opens and he's just radiating this arrogant confidence, like he's got electricity crackling around him, and he honestly believes that he's unstoppable.
Yeah, it's almost like he doesn't even see Andrea as a threat, does he? Like he just assumes she'll crumble before him.
And that's what makes the scene so compelling. Chris is so blinded by his ambition that he doesn't even understand the true nature of the island's power, and that might be his undoing.
Because of course, Andrea doesn't back down. She fights back. She taps into the island's energy, and she uses the water from the waterfall to deflect Chris's attack.
It's such a vivid image,
Yeah.
the water and electricity clashing, the island shaking beneath their feet. It's this raw display of power, right? And it shows how differently these characters are channeling it.
And the way it's written,
Mm.
you can almost feel that shift in power. Like Chris is completely caught off guard. He expected to dominate, but Andrea's resistance, it shows that he's not invincible.
He realizes that he can't overpower her directly, so he turns to Jordan, who's been standing there the whole time, just watching silently, struggling with his own, internal battle.
Poor Jordan. This is where things get really, really tough for him. He's been trying to avoid making any big choices, but Chris's command, it forces him to take a stand.
Yeah, this is the moment where Jordan's cautious nature, which has like shaped all his choices so far, it betrays him. He spent the entire game avoiding conflict, and now he finds himself right in the middle of the biggest one.
It's like the island is forcing him to face the consequences of not acting.
Yeah.
He can't just stand on the sidelines anymore. He has to choose a side.
Exactly. And his thoughts in this moment, they're just heartbreaking. He talks about feeling like he's both too much and not enough at the same time. It's like the power he's been given, it's consuming him, but it's not giving him that sense of control he might have, hoped for.
That feeling of emptiness, of being trapped in a situation with no good options, I think it resonated with a lot of players. It's a universal fear, isn't it? That fear of losing control over your own life.
Totally. And Jordan's struggle, it highlights that fear in such a visceral way. And even after he makes his choice, after he unleashes his power against Andrea alongside Chris, he feels nothing. There's no sense of victory, no remorse, just this unsettling emptiness.
It's like his sense of self is being chipped away by this forced alliance. He's gone against his own values. He's acted against his better judgment. And for what? For a brief moment of power that just leaves him feeling even more lost.
But for me, it raises an important question. Can we really judge someone's choices when we don't understand, the full context of their experiences, the pressures they're facing?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's easy to criticize from the outside, but we none of us really know how we would react in a situation like that.
Right, and this leads us to that incredible cliffhanger. Andrea, who has always been so proactive, so defiant, she's suddenly on her knees facing defeat, and the island itself it's shaking, like it's reacting to this whole conflict. And she's given these three impossible choices, right? She can use the last of her strength to lash out, she can beg for her life, or she can just stay silent and accept whatever comes next.
It's so tense. It really makes you think about what you would do in that situation. Each choice, it represents a different part of her character, and each one has, huge consequences.
Right. If she chooses to fight, will she tap into an even deeper well of power? Or will it just be this futile self-destructive act? And if she begs, will it appeal to whatever humanity is left in Chris or Jordan, or will it just be seen as weakness? And then if she stays silent, is an act of defiance? Is it surrendering to fate? Or is it something else entirely?
It's amazing how the game makes you, really think about these choices, not just in terms of strategy, but also in terms of character development and personal values. It's not just about winning or losing. It's about figuring out who you are when everything is on the line.
Absolutely. And the choices Chris and Jordan have to face, they're just as revealing. Chris, he's got the upper hand, right? So
Right.
he can choose to finish the job, eliminate Andrea, and solidify his dominance. He can spare her, but leave her broken and defeated as this constant reminder of his power. Or he could try to turn her to bring her under his control, just like he did with Jordan.
That last option, that's really interesting. Imagine Andrea with her connection to the island's natural power becoming a weapon in Chris's hands. That would change everything.
It's a pretty chilling thought, and it really makes you think about power and control. Could Andrea be swayed, or is her bond with the island something that Chris can't, really manipulate?
And then there's Jordan. He's caught in this whole power struggle, and he's essentially Chris's puppet at this point. But his options, they suggest that maybe he can get his agency back. He can follow Chris's orders and finish the job. He can argue for sparing Andrea, maybe out of some sense of mercy or guilt, or he can try to break free from Chris's control completely.
That last option that's the one that really gets me. What if Jordan, who's been so defined by caution and fear, he finally makes a bold choice? What if he decides to stand up to Chris and forge his own path?
That would be incredible. But can he really break free from that kind of manipulation once it's taken hold?
And that's the question that everyone's left with as the chapter ends. And that's what makes this cliffhanger so effective. It forces us to really think about choices, about the unpredictable nature of power, and about the possibility of redemption, even when all hope seems lost.
So we have these three characters, each at a crossroads.
Yeah.
Each with their own set of choices and possible outcomes. It's clear that this ending, it's about so much more than just, plot twists and cliffhangers. It's about exploring what it means to be human, the different ways we respond to power, and the choices we make when we're faced with the impossible. We're cracking open chapter 10. You don't belong here.
Yeah.
I mean, this chapter really slams Jim, Claudia, Mayo, and Travis together and gives them some seriously wild choices at, well, a pretty bizarre spot. A waterfall, but not just any waterfall. There's this glowing pool at the bottom,
Right.
and up above. A full-on battle raging.
It's intense.
I think what really gets me is how the setting, the waterfall itself, it's like a reflection of what's going on inside the characters.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you've got this crazy battle happening up top, right? Like all the island's chaos and external conflicts.
Right.
But then down below, you have this serene pool, almost mystical,
Right.
like it's hinting at an escape route or some kind of transformation.
It's like the setting's giving them a choice, almost. Fight or flight. Embrace the crazy or find some kind of sanctuary. And each character reacts in a totally different way, based on everything they've gone through and what they're holding on to.
Exactly. And that's what makes this chapter so compelling. Like, take Jim. He jumps into the glowing pool without a second thought.
Doesn't even hesitate.
Nope. Pure survival instinct. He's trusting what Claudia told him, that the pool will protect him from the island's influence. And then the immediate transformation he goes through, the strength, it's almost like he's tapping into some primal power.
It's a huge gamble, though, right? Putting all his faith in Claudia's interpretation of this pool's power. What if it's not the safe haven she thinks it is?
Right.
What if it's another one of the island's tricks? And this is where Jim's impulsiveness, which, let's face it, has helped and hurt him before, this is where it really comes into play.
Oh, yeah. Big time. And then to make things even more complicated, he sees Chris as one of the victorious blue figures.
It's like the island's messing with him on purpose, making him question who to trust, what's actually safe. You see this internal conflict play out when he immediately gets worried about Mayo hesitating.
Yeah.
He's already made his choice.
Now, Claudia, she's been on this island for 16 days. She's seen what it can do to people, the psychological toll. For her, the pool, well, it represents hope. A chance to protect Mayo from suffering the same fate as other players. There's a real sense of desperation in everything she does. Like, this is their last shot.
And that desperation makes her belief in the pool's power all the more poignant.
Yeah.
When she goes into the water, she feels this immense relief, this sense of belonging.
Right.
The golden light, the warmth. It's like she's finally found a place where she can let go of the fear and trauma that had been weighing her down. But then that peace is completely shattered when she realizes that Mayo didn't follow her.
Oof. It's a gut punch, like a reminder that even this sanctuary, this supposed safe place, might not be enough to break the island's hold on Mayo.
And then comes that chilling moment when Mayo looks at the blue figures and says, Ellos son los buenos. They are the good ones.
Chills.
Just that one line. It reveals how far apart they've drifted. Claudia sees the blue figures as a threat, a symbol of the island's corrupting power. But for Mayo, they're saviors.
Wow. It shows how their experiences are so subjective, and how the island can twist perception, turning friends into enemies and vice versa.
Absolutely.
It also makes you think, what is this pool, really? If it's supposed to protect you, give you clarity, why is Mayo fighting against it? Is it because she's already been influenced by the island so much, or is there something else going on, something we don't know yet? And then you've got Travis showing up at the waterfall with his whole pack. Remember, he started as this uh, pragmatic survivalist, right? Logic and self-reliance were his things.
Hmm.
But his transformation, it's maybe the most disturbing because it's so total. He's a zealot now, blindly following whatever the master says, seeing everything through this warped lens.
The way he talks about Jim like glowing wrong, it's chilling, shows how deeply he's absorbed the pack's whole ideology. There's no room for being an individual, for thinking critically. It's all about conforming, obeying the master's will.
Right.
It hints at this bigger power struggle happening on the island. These characters, they're being played, pulled in different directions by forces they don't understand.
Feels like we're watching this play with multiple stages, and each character is caught in their own spotlight. What stands out to you about how each of them's facing these dilemmas?
Yeah, it's just brutal for Jim and Claudia. I mean, what do they even do? Do they try to force Mayo into the pool, or do they just let her decide, even if it means she sides with, well, what they see as this dangerous force?
Right.
It's like they want to protect her so badly, but they can't control what she does.
And that really gets at one of the big themes of Survive the Island, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
This tension between wanting to survive on your own and needing to connect with others. Claudia's desperate to save Mayo, but that desperation, it could make her miss that maybe Mayo really believes this, that maybe the blue figures are something different for her. It's like a reminder that even with the best intentions, you can't always save the people you care about.
It makes you wonder if Jim, with how impulsive he can be, will be the one to make that rash decision. He's acted without thinking things through before. Like, remember when he went after that creature in the jungle?
Oh, yeah.
So will he think that pushing Mayo into the pool is the only way to save her, even if he has to use force?
It's a real possibility. Jim's protective, but he can be reckless. And when you look at his potential actions compared to what Claudia's going through, it brings up another theme, the weight of past trauma. I mean, Claudia's seen what this island can do to people, and she's terrified of losing Mayo to that same darkness. The choices she's making, they come from a place that Jim, at this point, he just doesn't get.
Right. And then there's Mayo, the biggest enigma in all this. We know the island's voices have messed with her before, but now she's drawn to these blue figures with this sense of, like, recognition, even calls them family. Is that just another form of manipulation? Or has she stumbled onto something the others haven't?
I think it's brilliant how the creators leave us guessing about her motives. It makes us, the audience, and maybe even Jim and Claudia, question what we think is good and bad on this island. What if the blue figures aren't actually this evil force? Or maybe Mayo's connection to them is something else entirely.
Trying to figure out what she's really thinking is such a challenge. Does she think the blue figures will help her escape the island's influence, or are they pulling her in deeper? And how will this all affect her and Claudia after everything they've been through?
Now, when it comes to Travis, his choices seem pretty clear-cut, but they have big consequences. He could go after Jim, do what the master wants, but it wouldn't feel like a real win, would it?
No.
He's seen how powerful the blue figures are. They're on a different level than that creature, even Jim with his red glow. And it makes you wonder, what is this master anyway? Is it like an actual being, or is it just an idea, like a way for the island's power to work through people who are vulnerable? Travis is blindly obeying, which makes it seem like he still doesn't understand what the island really is.
So he could go after Jim and join the blue figures. It's risky, but it might also be the smartest move. And that brings us back to those core themes of this chapter: choice, perception, and how power is always changing on this island. Every character's at a crossroads, and what they decide won't just affect them, it'll shape the whole story.
Yeah.
It feels like chapter 10 just blew up the whole story, and now we're left trying to put the pieces back together, We're invested. Like, I'm seriously thinking, what would I do if I were Jim or Claudia with Mayo acting like this?
Right.
Is it more important to, like, respect her choice, even if it seems wrong, or to try and protect her from something dangerous?
I mean, we face these same kinds of dilemmas in our own lives. When do you step in and when do you back off and let people make their own mistakes, even if it hurts to watch? Survive the Island makes us think about those tough choices, and there are no easy answers.
For sure. And that makes the story even more powerful, because it's not just about surviving the physical stuff on the island, right?
Yeah.
It's about surviving all the emotional and mental chaos, the battles each character is fighting within themselves.
And those internal struggles often mirror the external conflicts, like, the one at the waterfall, the battle
Uh-huh.
between Andrea, the golden figure, and then Chris and Jordan with their blue power.
Yeah.
It's more than just a fight for control. It's like a symbol of this bigger clash between different ways of thinking, different ways of existing on this island.
You've got Andrea, who seems to represent this connection to the island's natural energy, that golden light Claudia felt so drawn to.
Right.
And then there's Chris and Jordan, with this almost supernatural blue power. It's alluring and scary at the same time. It's like the island itself is offering these competing paths, different kinds of power, and the characters are caught in the middle.
And each character sees that battle in a totally different way, which makes it even more complex.
Oh, yeah.
Claudia, she sees it as proof that she was right to be afraid, a sign that the blue power is bad news. Mayo, she sees it as a victory, a sign that the blue figures are the good guys. Travis, he sees it as an opportunity, a chance to join the winning team.
It's wild. They're all watching the same thing, but seeing completely different movies. Their views are shaped by what they've been through and the choices they've already made.
Exactly.
And that makes the story so much richer, so much deeper than just a simple good versus evil thing.
And it keeps us on the edge of our seats, right? Because we're always second-guessing ourselves. Who should we trust? What should we believe? Is there even a right side in this whole mess? Or is it all just about perspective? A survival game where the rules keep changing. If the island is controlling them on purpose, then even the choices that feel free might be part of some bigger plan. It's a scary thought, but it also makes the story that much more gripping.
It's like we're watching a science experiment, and the characters are the lab rats. And we're right there with them, trying to crack the code, understand what this whole experiment is really about. All right, everyone get ready. We are looking specifically at Chapter 10. And things are getting pretty crazy for three of our players.
Right.
Ian, Rosendo, and Bryan.
And what makes this chapter so interesting is it really showcases the interactive storytelling.
Absolutely.
We're not just reading along, we're getting into the heads of these players
Right.
as they make choices that could completely change the course of the game.
It's like we're right there in the jungle with them.
Yeah.
Feeling the heat, the tension, and just this like creeping sense of dread.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, this game isn't just about escaping the island.
Right.
It's about the psychological
That's right.
and strategic battles that unfold between the players.
It's like we can see into their souls as they grapple with these tough decisions.
Okay, so picture this.
Okay.
A dense, humid jungle, sunlight barely filtering through the thick canopy. Ian is sprinting towards a concrete bunker,
Okay.
heart pounding in his chest.
Yeah.
He knows Bryan is close behind, but it's not really a chase.
Right.
It's like Bryan is toying with him.
Yeah, it's more like a cat and mouse game now.
Exactly.
Remember how in the earlier chapters, Bryan was all about gathering information,
Right.
trying to understand the island's secrets?
Yeah, he was like the lore guy.
Yeah, he was all about the lore. But that thirst for knowledge led him to a pretty dark encounter in Chapter 9.
Uh-huh.
And now it seems like he's tapped into a power
Yeah.
that is deeply connected to the island itself.
And that power is not pretty.
No, it's not.
Bryan's not just physically stronger now.
Right.
He's controlling the vegetation,
Yeah.
using the roots like tentacles to snare Ian,
Mm-hmm.
entangling him, immobilizing him.
Oh,
It's really chilling stuff.
yeah, you can really feel the tension rising here.
Absolutely.
This is where the game mechanics get really interesting.
Okay.
When Bryan chose to accept that power,
Right.
he didn't just gain new abilities.
Yeah.
He shifted the entire power dynamic of the game.
Oh, wow.
He's a force to be reckoned with now.
Yeah.
A walking embodiment of the island's, wild energy.
And poor Ian, who's always been a bit of a lone wolf,
Yeah.
finds himself totally at Bryan's mercy.
It's true.
Remember how he rescued Graham earlier in the game,
Right.
showing those flashes of heroism?
Right.
Now trapped and helpless?
Yeah.
He's facing the consequences of his past choices, his isolation, and his inability to fully trust others.
Yeah, it's like all coming back to haunt him now.
And just when you think things couldn't get any worse,
Oh.
Rosendo emerges.
Oh, no.
He stumbles out of the bunker,
Oh, jeez.
clearly shaken by whatever he encountered inside,
Yeah.
and walks straight into this nightmare scenario.
Talk about bad timing.
It was a classic case of out of the frying pan into the fire.
Totally.
Rosendo, who's always been about self-preservation and control,
Yeah.
is suddenly caught between a rock and a hard place.
Oh, he's in trouble.
His decision to lock Bryan out of that bunker back in Chapter 7 has come back to bite him, hasn't it?
It's like the game is making him face the music now.
Oh yeah, big time.
Remember, Rosendo's driven by a deep distrust of others?
Right.
He plays the game like it's a chess match, always trying to stay one step ahead.
Yeah.
But in this situation, he's lost control.
Oh, he has.
And his options are scary limited.
So here we have our three players.
Mhm.
Ian, the trapped hero, Rosendo, the cornered strategist,
Right.
and Bryan, the newly empowered antagonist.
Yeah, and the chapter ends here,
Yeah.
leaving us on this massive cliffhanger.
It's a real nail-biter.
Oh, it is, but that's where the magic of Survive the Island comes in. Because now it's up to the players to decide what happens next.
Wow.
Each character is presented with a set of choices, and each choice could have ripple effects throughout the game,
Right.
impacting not just their own fate, but the fate of the entire narrative.
Let's break down the choices they're given, starting with Ian.
Okay.
He's got three options, and honestly, none of them are very good.
No, they're not great.
He can try to distract Bryan, maybe buy Rosendo some time to escape,
Yeah, that's one way.
or he could try to appeal to Bryan, beg for his life.
That's risky.
And then there's that third option.
Ooh,
It's a much darker one.
the manipulative one.
Yeah, where he tries to turn Bryan's rage towards Rosendo.
Oh, that's a high-stakes gamble.
It really is. High risk, high reward.
Totally. And if we think about Ian's character,
Yeah,
he's shown us that he can be both selfless and strategic.
right. So begging for mercy
Yeah.
doesn't really seem like his style.
No, not really, especially knowing how deeply Bryan has transformed.
Right. But sacrificing himself to save Rosendo,
Yeah.
that's a little more like him. But there's also that manipulative side of him.
Uh-huh. He can be cunning.
For sure.
So Ian's decision isn't just about escaping this immediate threat.
That's right.
It's about how he wants to position himself in the game as a whole.
Yeah. Does he want to be the hero, the martyr, or the schemer?
His choice here could have some big consequences down the line.
Oh, definitely huge consequences. Okay, let's move on to Rosendo.
Okay.
He's always been the cautious, calculating type. But in this situation, he is totally out of his element.
Oh, yeah. And his choices really show that he can
Uh-huh.
attack Bryan head on, which is probably suicide with Bryan's new powers.
Yeah, incredibly risky.
Or he can run back into the jungle.
Right, just try to disappear.
But neither of those options really play to Rosendo's strengths.
I mean, he's not a fighter.
Right.
And relying on blind luck doesn't seem like him at all.
No, not really.
He's got two other options that are much more interesting.
Okay.
He can use the bunker door as a shield. That shows a level of resourcefulness that we haven't really seen from him before.
Interesting.
Or he can go back into the bunker,
Yeah.
face whatever horrors he just ran from.
Right.
That choice is super interesting because it suggests he's more afraid of Bryan
Yeah.
than whatever's in the bunker.
He's picking his poison.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a big shift in thinking for Rosendo.
Right.
He usually wants to gather information, understand the rules of the game. But here, he's forced to make a choice based purely on instinct,
Right. Pure gut feeling.
and it shows the power of fear. Rosendo, the master strategist,
Yeah.
is being driven by pure emotion.
It really makes you wonder, will this change how he plays the game going forward?
Yeah, will he become more reckless, or will he stick to his cautious ways?
I guess we'll have to see. All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Bryan, his transformation is the biggest thing in Chapter 10.
For sure, he's gone from a curious information seeker to someone who is intimidating and powerful.
And his choices reflect that change.
They do.
He can kill Ian,
Right.
just totally solidify his dominance and send a message to the other players.
It would be a power move.
Or he can go after Rosendo,
Right.
seeking revenge for what he sees as a betrayal.
Both of those choices fit with the darker path Bryan has chosen.
Yeah, he's fueled by resentment and wanting to be in control.
But there's a third option.
Right.
It feels really out of place with how he's acting now.
It does.
It's called Cool Down, Stop the Madness.
Almost like a little bit of the old Bryan is still there.
Yeah, the one who valued knowledge and understanding over brute force.
I wonder if it's even possible for him to back down now.
Yeah, Has the island's power changed him too much?
Or is there still a chance he can resist the urge for revenge?
So we have our 3 players, each at a crossroads,
Yeah.
each facing a choice that could change everything. Now I think it's time to step back
Okay.
and look at the bigger picture.
You know what really stands out to me is how this chapter shows just how deep Survive the Island is psychologically.
Yeah.
It's not just about surviving, it's about choices and the consequences, about moral dilemmas and trying to stay human,
Yeah.
even under extreme pressure.
Yeah, each of these players is dealing with their own internal battles.
That's true.
Ian trying to balance staying alive with wanting to be a hero.
Right.
Rosendo constantly calculating,
Uh-huh.
trying to stay one step ahead,
Yeah.
but now facing a situation where his usual tactics might not work.
Right.
And then Bryan, consumed by the island's power,
Yeah.
fighting to hold on to who he was before. I'm curious, what has surprised you the most in this chapter? What's really stuck with you?
You know, it's how the game forces players to face their own values.
Okay.
Take Ian, for example.
Yeah.
His choice isn't just about surviving this situation.
Right.
It's about deciding what kind of person he wants to be.
Yeah.
Does he put his own life first, even if it means someone else dies?
Mm-hmm.
Or does he act selflessly, even if it puts him in danger?
Right. These are tough choices.
They are.
And there's no easy answer.
It's about understanding that people are complicated.
Yeah.
And that even in the worst situations, we can be good or bad. And it's interesting to compare that to what Rosendo is going through.
Okay.
He's always been about logic.
Right.
About being in control.
But now logic might not be enough.
Yeah.
He has to trust his gut.
Uh-huh.
And that's terrifying for someone who plans every move. And you can see that in his options.
Yeah.
Does he stick to his old strategies, even if they might not work now?
Right.
Or does he take a risk,
Uh-huh.
embrace the unknown, and just hope for the best? And then there's Bryan.
Yeah.
His change brings up big questions about power and corruption.
It does.
The island gave him amazing abilities,
Mm-hmm.
but at what cost
Right.
did he lose his humanity?
It's easy to see Bryan as the bad guy now.
Yeah.
Like, he's been totally corrupted by the island's power.
Yeah.
But I think it's more complex than that.
Maybe it's not a simple good versus evil story.
Right.
Maybe it's about understanding why people do what they do,
Yeah.
how our wants can lead us to both good and bad places.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the strongest messages of Survive the Island.
Okay.
It reminds us that there aren't any easy answers.
Right.
No clear heroes or villains.
Uh-huh.
It's about accepting that people are messy.
Right.
And that we're always trying to find our way in a world full of challenges.
Well said. Survive the Island is more than just a game.
It is.
It's a reflection of what it means to be human.
Uh-huh.
A story about survival, morality, and the choices that shape us. All right, so we've got 5 players: Andrew, Jill, Cowin, Jordanna, and Boon, and they're all about to make some serious decisions, like life or death type stuff.
What I think is so fascinating about this chapter is it's like, you know, the culmination of everything they've gone through. The island has been testing them, pushing them to their limits, and now it's demanding they make a choice.
Yeah.
And all their past experiences, like, that's all going to play into how they approach these decisions.
Totally. So, like, imagine this. The group is still, like, totally freaked out. Boon was just, like, dragged underground by some unseen force, and everyone's understandably shaken.
Right, right.
On top of that, they're walking towards the jungle, drawn by a scream. It's a very primal, visceral call to action.
Oh, yeah.
And each character reacts to it in a way that reflects their core personality, which is so cool.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so you've got Andrew, our, like, resident risk-taker, who sees it as a challenge, like another puzzle to solve in this, like, twisted game the island has become. It's this belief that he has control that's driven him from the start. But even Andrew is unsettled by 2 things. 1, the shipwreck has, like, inexplicably relocated. And 2, this newcomer, Jill, is eerily calm in all this chaos.
Interesting.
These events, they challenge his worldview, suggesting that the island might be operating on a level he just doesn't understand.
Right.
And then there's Jill. She's the intuitive one and seems to have this almost supernatural connection to the island, trusting her instincts even when they lead her down these strange paths. So we have Andrew, the bold leader, and Jill, the compassionate protector, both walking towards this scream. Then you have Cowin, the pragmatist, who's becoming increasingly uneasy. This guy thrives on logic, and the island is throwing logic right out the window.
Oh, yeah.
Remember how uneasy he was with that weird shift in the air? It was a clear sign of the island's active and possibly malevolent presence.
Right.
He's one of the first to realize they're not just surviving the island. The island is actively testing them.
Mm.
And now Jill arrives so at ease in this creepy environment. It just makes Callan even more suspicious.
I can see why.
Yeah, he senses something, I don't know, calculated in her words, like she's hiding something. And then we have Jordanna, who's a completely different person after that encounter with Lauren. That dark power she's connected to, it's guiding her actions, influencing her perceptions. She sees Jill as a threat that needs to be eliminated.
Oh, wow.
And it just goes to show how the island can corrupt, how it can twist even the most well-intentioned people. I mean, this is the same Jordanna who risked her life to save another survivor. Now she's a weapon in the island's, like, arsenal.
That's intense.
It really is. And finally, there's poor Boon. He's a shadow of his former self after that traumatic experience underground.
Right.
The island has messed with his sense of reality, making him question everything. He sees this conflict brewing between Jordanna and Jill, not as like a human interaction, but as a clash of otherworldly forces.
Yeah.
It highlights the psychological toll the island can take. He's constantly wondering if he's going crazy, if anything he's experiencing is even real, like he's trapped in a nightmare.
It was like one of those movies.
Totally. And then things escalate. In the middle of all this chaos, a storm erupts. But this isn't just any storm. It feels like the island itself is being ripped apart, setting the stage for a final showdown. So you have 5 players, each shaped by their experiences, heading towards a confrontation that could change everything. And lurking in the background is this powerful entity demanding they choose a side. This is where things get really interesting.
And the choices they're given, it's not just a simple, like, yes or no.
Right.
Each option has this, psychological weight. They have to confront their deepest fears and desires.
Okay, so let's break down these, dilemmas, starting with Andrew. He's the guy who loves a challenge, thrives on risk, always wants to be in control. His options are fight it, let it take you, or run, get out. Knowing Andrew, I doubt he's ever choose to run.
You're probably right.
It just doesn't fit his personality.
Running would mean admitting defeat, and Andrew, he's never been one to back down.
Yeah.
But let it take you is interesting. It implies surrender, allowing this dark force to kind of consume him. It's a huge gamble, and I'm not sure if he'd be willing to relinquish control like that.
But what if he sees it as a different kind of control? Like, what if he thinks by letting this force in, he can somehow understand it, maybe even manipulate it to his advantage? I mean, that's a classic Andrew move, finding a way to win, even when the rules seem impossible.
It's definitely risky, but it does play into his fascination with that, darker side of the island.
Yeah.
Remember his heel turn, embracing the villainous role? There's a part of him that's drawn to power, even if it means, compromising his morals.
So, cunning strategist versus the defiant hero. Then there's fight it, which totally speaks to his core personality, that stubborn determination to overcome any obstacle. I mean, he faced down a sinking ship in a raging storm. So facing this mysterious force might seem like just another challenge.
Exactly, and that's what makes Andrew so complex.
Yeah.
He's a fighter, but he's also drawn to power. Which instinct will win out in this situation?
Oh, it's a nail-biter for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, let's move on to Jill. She's our intuitive, compassionate one, and her options are hold the line, let go, or focus on protecting the others. What do you think will resonate most with her?
Well, hold the line suggests resisting this entity, maintaining her connection to the island, but also, protecting herself. And that plays into her strength, right? That
Yeah.
ability to harness the island's power, like when she, shaped the sand into shields during that confrontation.
Oh, right.
That was awesome.
She wasn't just defending herself. She was actively, shaping the environment to her will.
Exactly. But hold the line also carries a risk. It implies this continued reliance on the island's power, which might come at a cost. It's like making a deal with a devil. You get what you want, but there's always a price to pay.
And that price might be her own humanity, her own sense of self. It's a tough choice, especially for someone like Jill, who values compassion and connection.
Which is why focus on protecting the others is so compelling, right? Remember, she revived Sarah M., even though it put her at risk.
Oh, yeah.
And she clearly feels responsible for the others. But can she really protect them from something this powerful?
It all comes down to how much faith she has in herself and her connection to the island. Maybe she believes that by focusing her energy on protecting others, she can somehow deflect this entity's, attention. It's selfless, but it might also be the most strategic option she has.
It's this delicate balance. protecting others while also protecting herself. What about let go? Do you think she would ever consider surrendering?
Honestly, I don't see it. Jill has always shown this willingness to fight, to shape her own destiny. Even when she's following her intuition, she's still making a choice. Let go just feels too passive for her.
That's a good point. Jill's not a pawn, she's an active player.
Ah,
Okay, let's shift gears to Cowin,
right.
our resident skeptic.
Yes.
His options are resist, give in, or escape. I have a feeling resist will be the strongest pull for him.
Oh, totally. Cowan is all about logic and control. He's been trying to figure out the island's rules from the moment he got there, and resist is all about refusing to be controlled.
And remember that unease he felt sensing the island's presence?
Oh, yeah.
That's resistance.
Yeah.
He doesn't trust this entity, and he's not going to give in without a fight.
Even if that fight seems impossible. But here's the thing. Cowan's also a pragmatist. If he sees no chance of winning, could he shift to escape? Like prioritize his own survival over everything else?
It'd be a tough one for him. He's shown a commitment to collective survival, working with the others to get through things, but the island, it's pushing him to his limits, making him question his loyalties.
It's like the island is asking him, how far are you willing to go to survive? Are you willing to abandon your friends, your principles? It's a heavy question, and I'm not sure even Cowan knows the answer.
Now, give in is a very dark option. Complete surrender, embracing the entity's power. And while Cowin might be tempted by, the promise of ending his struggle, I don't think he's broken enough to choose that path.
Not yet.
Yeah.
He still has a spark of fight left in him. Okay, let's talk about Jordanna. Her situation is so unique because she doesn't really have free will.
Right.
She's being controlled by this dark force, and her options, finish it, hesitate, and abandon the fight, are more like commands.
It's really tragic. This was a woman who risked everything to save another person, and now she's just a weapon in this entity's hands. Finish it is the most chilling, urging her to eliminate Jill, who the entity clearly sees as a threat.
It makes you wonder what Jill represents. Is it her connection to the island, her compassion, or something else entirely?
It's a mystery for sure.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the complexity of the island's agenda. What's its end game?
Okay, so we have Jordanna, a tragic figure driven by forces beyond her control. And then we have Boon, who's barely holding on to his sanity. His options save Andrew and Cowin, save yourself, or let go. They reflect his internal struggle between loyalty and self-preservation.
Boon's journey has been heartbreaking. He started as this logical, responsible guy, but the island has systematically dismantled his sense of reality. Save Andrew and Cowin speaks to that remaining loyalty, that innate desire to help others, even in his, broken state. But it's dangerous considering how fragile he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like he's caught between who he used to be and who the island is forcing him to become. Save Yourself acknowledges the reality he's barely holding on, and trying to help others might just drag him under.
It's hard to face that, especially for someone who always put others first. And then there's let go, which is ultimate surrender. It's tempting, offering release from the torment and confusion, but at a huge cost.
It's like the island is saying, give in to the darkness, embrace oblivion. It's the only way to end your suffering. And for someone like Boon, who's been through so much pain, that might seem like a valid choice.
It's a chilling thought, and it makes you wonder if any of these characters can escape the island's influence, or if they're all destined to be consumed by it.
We've talked about the players, their choices, all those psychological pressures pushing them to the brink. But now, let's talk about that epic showdown between Jordanna and Jill. Because this confrontation, it's not just a fight, it's like symbolic, right? This clash between two very different aspects of the island's influence.
Yeah, right.
Jordanna represents the raw, destructive power of the island.
Oh, yeah.
And Jill, well, she embodies a more intuitive, almost symbiotic connection with the island.
So it's like two sides of the same coin, two different ways the island exerts its power.
Exactly. And don't forget that raging storm. It's not just background noise. It's like a reflection of the island's own turmoil. Like it's struggling to maintain control as these two forces clash.
Right.
So walk us through it. What happens when these two powerful women finally collide?
Okay, so picture this. Jordanna, eyes blazing with this unnatural energy, unleashes this torrent of lightning towards Jill, just pure destructive power, meant to obliterate.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And Jill, does she just stand there and take it?
Not a chance. Remember, Jill has that deep connection to the island, too. She's able to shape the sand, make it into shields and walls, deflecting those lightning bolts. It's like she's dancing with the storm, using its power against itself.
Oh, that's so Jill. always finding a way to turn things around, use her intuition and resourcefulness to survive.
Yeah.
But wait, what about the others? Where are Andrew, Cowin, and Boon during all of this?
Oh, they're caught in the crossfire, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
This isn't just a battle between Jordanna and Jill, it's a test for all of them.
Oh, okay.
Remember how Andrew was battling that darkness inside himself? Well, the storm, it intensifies it, pushes him even closer to the edge. And Cowin, our pragmatist, he's desperately clinging to logic, trying to make sense of it all. But the island is chipping away at his sanity, making him question if there is even any logic to be found.
Oh, man. And Boon. I can only imagine this is a complete nightmare for him.
Oh, absolutely. This is the breaking point for him. It pushes him further down that spiral of despair and madness. He's seeing this clash of forces he just can't comprehend, confirming his worst fears about the island.
So this confrontation is like this catalyst, pushing each character toward making their final choice. It's like the island is saying, pick a side, declare your allegiance, or be destroyed. But what are the sides? Is it as simple as aligning with Jordanna's power or Jill's connection? Or is there like something more going on, a choice we haven't even thought of?
Yeah. It's like the island is this giant chessboard, and we're only seeing a few of the pieces.
Oh, that's a good point. And that brings us back to you, the listener. As you continue your journey through Survive the Island, think about this. What would you choose in this situation? Would you embrace power, seek connection with the unknown, or fight to hold on to yourself? Have you ever gotten this feeling you stumbled onto something you really shouldn't have seen?
Yeah.
Well, that's Michelle right now because she's facing this really, really big decision.
It's really cool how the game uses the actual environment to signal this change in tone, this wound in the island. It's described as this crater pulsing with blue energy.
Uh-huh.
And it's not just something you see, right? It's this
Yes.
feeling. It's
Wow.
ominous, unsettling, like right before a storm hits.
And it's a storm that Michelle has actually seen in visions.
Right.
She's been tapping into the island and its energy.
Right.
And she's been feeling a connection with the Bloodwood tree. But this place, even in her visions, just felt wrong.
Yeah,
So she's already on edge.
totally. And then
Yeah.
you've got the voice. This is direct and sharp.
Right.
Like, imagine how jarring that would be.
Yeah.
1 minute you're working out clues, and the next, boom, you're facing something that says it's been watching you the whole time.
The storm that, took
Yeah.
out Sarah R. and Emily,
Yeah.
the ship sinking with Sarah M. and Lauren, and even how Kate went mad. This voice says it was all the island.
Uh-huh.
Like the island itself is destructive.
It's actually really clever. It's playing on Michelle's fears. I mean, think about the trauma she's already been through. And this voice makes her question everything, even the Bloodwood tree.
Because she's already vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's made her confront these fears, her own limitations.
And then you've got the Bloodwood sap.
Right.
Gave her strength, visions, but maybe it's also messed with her perspective. So is what she's seeing really the truth? Or is it, filtered through the tree?
Right.
And the voice definitely wants her to think it's the tree messing with her.
And that leads to this massive dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
Is this voice like evil, or is it something that's actually protecting everyone, even if it's scary? Is it using her, or is it telling her a hard truth?
That's what's so great about this chapter.
Yeah.
It puts you, the player, and Michelle right in this impossible spot.
Right.
There are no easy answers. You've got to think critically, and you can't take anything for granted. You've got to look at how you see things, you know? How do we know what's true?
Right.
Really makes you think.
Okay, so Michelle have 4 options, and they could completely change her story. Let's
Yeah.
go through them.
Okay, so first you've got burn away the corruption. Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Fits with what the Bloodwood tree has been saying.
Mm-hmm.
But is it really the right thing to get rid of?
Right.
What if she's been tricked into seeing corruption when it's really something else?
Okay, and destroy him? This one is bold,
Yeah.
maybe even reckless. But, does Michelle really understand what might happen? If she gets rid of this thing, does she actually free the island?
Yeah.
Or does it make things worse?
No.
And then there's steal his secrets. That's the one that seems like she's trying to outsmart it, get the upper hand. Can she even do something like that?
Right.
And then the last one is creepy. Let him in. She'd be giving up completely.
Yeah.
Trusting this voice, letting it in. Is this like faith? Or is it just like a desperate thing to do.
Each of these options is like a piece of Michelle's journey. How she sees herself is changing.
So we need to look at each one by one, and think about Michelle, you know, her personality, what she's good at, what she's not good at,
Yeah.
starting with burn away the corruption.
Yeah, it's like the warrior's way, right?
She's got to be righteous.
Yeah.
I mean, think about what Michelle has gone through.
Eh.
She's seen how messed up this island is.
Right. She's probably angry.
Yeah.
And she needs someone to blame, something to fight.
Right, right. Especially with the bloodwood tree, like whispering in her ear. It's been guiding her, giving her strength.
Yeah.
But has it, like, made her think in black and white,
Totally.
Like good versus evil, no in between.
That's the problem. What if this corruption thing is just like a small piece of something way bigger, something really complex? And what if like attacking it just messes up some kind of balance, makes things way worse?
But Michelle really wants to help people.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe she thinks, this is the way to save everyone, to make a safe place.
Okay, but can you really burn away corruption? I mean, come on, the whole island seems to love chaos.
Right?
Like, it thrives on it. What if she's chasing something that doesn't even exist?
All right, so let's look at the total opposite. Destroy him. This one's like, I'm not going to let you control me. Maybe even a little desperate, right?
Totally.
Like Michelle has been lied to and used, and she doesn't feel safe at all. Maybe this is the only way she thinks she can fight back.
Right.
Take back control.
But what if it goes wrong? The voice says it's keeping the island from destroying everything.
Right.
What happens if she just gets rid of it? Does everything go crazy?
Right.
It's a huge risk, not just for her, but for everyone else, too.
So is she thinking this through, or is she just reacting, Like just doing something out of fear and anger?
It's tough to know for sure. We need to know more about what's going on in her head. But she is making a choice. She's not just letting things happen to her. She's pushing back, even if it's super dangerous.
Okay, let's switch gears to steal his secrets. This one seems like the sneaky option. Like she has to be really clever.
Michelle's not really a spy, but she's taken risks before.
Right.
Remember when she climbed the bloodwood tree?
Yeah.
That took guts. And she was thinking strategically.
Right, and maybe the island is on her side, in a way. She's using its energy. She's having those visions. She senses things other people don't. Maybe she can use all of that to, like, sneak into the voices world and figure it out.
Right. Like she's becoming the island whisperer.
Yeah.
Using the bloodwood tree to outsmart this voice.
Right.
Turning its power back on itself.
But what if she misjudges how strong the voice is?
Yeah.
What if it already knows what she's doing and is, like, setting a trap for her?
Yeah.
And even if she gets the secrets, then what? Does she use them to help everyone, or does she run away and leave everyone else behind?
It's a good question. Power can be a lonely thing.
Yeah.
So is she still the Michelle who wants to be part of a group? Or is she just doing whatever it takes to survive on her own?
Okay, let's talk about the really scary one. Let him in.
Yeah.
This is like saying, I give up, you're in control. I can't even imagine Michelle doing that after fighting this hard.
Maybe she's just broken. What if she's had enough? She's hurt, she's scared, and she just wants answers. Maybe this seems like the only way out of the pain.
Or maybe, hear me out, what if she's playing the long game?
Oh.
Like maybe she thinks this is how she can get closer to the voice.
Right.
To understand it and find its weakness.
That's a long shot.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that be crazy?
Right.
The quiet one, the one who just wanted to survive, turns out to be the one playing everyone.
Yeah.
That's totally the kind of twist the island would pull. Just when you think you've got it figured out, it changes everything.
Right. And that brings us back to, like, who is Michelle? What does she really care about? What's making her do the things she does? What's behind her decisions now? So as you think about these four options, think about what they tell us about Michelle, how she's changing.
And think about what they say about you. If you were her, standing at that crater, what would you do?
And what does that say about you? But let's go back to Michelle and those four choices she's got. We've talked about what could happen because of them, but what about how they might make her feel? What would they do to her on the inside? Let's start with, burn away the corruption. How would that mess with her head?
Well, if she really thinks that's the root of everything bad, destroying it could make her feel like she's done something important.
Yeah.
Like she's made a real difference. It could give her a purpose. Like she's a good guy in a crazy world.
Right, like it's cleaning everything up, getting rid of bad energy. But what if it doesn't work? What if the corruption is, like, way worse than she thinks? What if it's just part of the island, something that can't be destroyed?
Oh, then she'd be so disappointed. She could lose hope, maybe even start to doubt everything. I mean, she's already questioning everything.
Yeah.
If this doesn't work, she might not believe the Bloodwood tree anymore, and that would leave her feeling lost and alone.
And destroy him, I just feels angry, doesn't it?
Yeah.
She just has to do something right now. What kind of stuff would she be carrying around after that?
It might feel good at first, like getting rid of all that anger and frustration, but killing something, even if it's just a voice, is a big deal.
Right.
It could make her feel guilty, like she did something awful, maybe even empty inside.
Yeah. Especially if it makes things worse, right? Like, what if getting rid of the voice unleashes something even more terrible? Michelle would have to live with that, knowing she caused it. That instead of making things better, she made them worse.
That's a tough one. It's like she's trying to play God. How can she decide who lives and who dies? Does she even understand what the voice is doing? Maybe it's there for a reason. Or is she just angry and wants revenge? What if that's all she cares about?
Steal his secrets. That one seems like the one that would really make her think.
Yeah, she'd have to be so smart
Yeah.
and sneaky.
Right. It could make her pay attention to detail, be more resourceful. It could also make her even more curious,
Yeah.
Like she really wants to know things.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine how amazing it would be to outsmart something that powerful. Like she's playing a game, but with real consequences.
Totally.
But what if it's too much for her?
Yeah.
What if the voice is too strong and she can't handle it? What if she gets caught?
Then she would never trust anyone again. She'd be so paranoid, always watching her back, thinking everyone's trying to trick her. All the secrets she learned could turn on her, make her doubt everything, even herself.
Okay, and then there's the one that really creeps me out.
Mm.
Let him in.
Mm.
I feel like that could just destroy her.
It's like playing with fire. Maybe she'd understand everything, you know? Like the mysteries of the island, her place in it, all that. Think about the stuff she could learn.
Yeah, like she's waking up, right?
Yeah.
Like becoming part of something bigger.
Right.
But what if it's all a lie? What if the voice is just using her, feeding off her weakness?
Then she's gone. She's just a puppet doing whatever it wants.
Right.
She wouldn't be herself anymore, just an empty shell.
So all these choices could really change Michelle, not just what happens to her, but who she is.
Exactly.
They make us think about what we're made of. How much can we take before we break? How far can we go before we give up everything we believe in?
And what does it even mean to survive? Is it just breathing and not dying? Or is there something more to it, something deeper, something inside us? Mike's story in chapter 10 is such a great example of why people just get so drawn into this game, because it's not just about can you survive like the physical challenges. It's like this psychological battle that's going on, this erosion of like certainty,
Yeah,
and then these defining moments where we see a player's true nature come out.
exactly. And remember how Mike starts out? I mean, he was all about logic and practicality, right? Back in chapters 1 and 2, when everybody else was, freaking out, he was the one saying,
Yeah.
hey, let's check the shipwreck for supplies.
Yeah. He was so methodical, like very in control almost. Like he thought he could just like outsmart the island
Right.
with pure reason.
Yeah, but then that starts to crumble, doesn't it? The whispers starting in chapter 3 really get under his skin.
Big time.
It's like the island is personalizing the torment, playing on his deepest fears.
It's so fascinating how Survive the Island messes with your head. Like, you know what I mean? It isn't just jump scares or monster chases. It's this like
Right.
slow creeping dread that just like seeps into every choice you make. Do you think his initial pragmatism like made him more susceptible to that kind of pressure? Like the more he clung to logic, the harder he fell when it started to fail him.
That's a good point. It's like the game is designed to dismantle those defenses piece by piece
Yes.
that you so carefully constructed.
Right. Totally. And we see that reflected in his increasing isolation, right? By the time you get to chapters 4 and 5, he's actively choosing to separate himself from other players.
Yeah.
It's like the island has convinced him that trust is a weakness, that he's better off alone.
Is he losing it, or is that like some twisted act of defiance?
It's never really clear, right? And that's the brilliance of it. It's left deliberately ambiguous. It forces you, the player, to question whether you're truly in control or if you're being manipulated by these forces you don't understand.
Right.
And that leads us right into chapter 10, where Mike makes this huge decision to wake up and reject the whispers.
It's like he's finally snapping out of a trance.
Yeah.
But even then, it's described as this struggle like swimming against a riptide.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, is that truly him asserting his will? Or is the island just letting him think he has a choice?
Right, that's the question that hangs over the whole game. How much free will do we actually have?
Yeah. Especially when you consider those fragmented visions he starts having.
Oh, yeah.
It's like he's getting glimpses into the experiences of other players.
Mm.
It's this sense of like interconnected destinies.
Yes.
It's creepy, but also kind of beautiful in a weird way.
Absolutely. It reinforces that idea that nobody is truly alone on the island, even when you feel most isolated.
Right.
Your choices are like rippling outward, affecting other people, and their choices impact you in ways you may never fully understand.
He steps out of that structure and boom, the warmth is gone. It's suddenly freezing.
Yeah.
And he hears those raised voices in the distance. I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
That survived the island for you, right? It keeps you constantly off balance, never lets you get too comfortable.
Right.
Even when you think you've escaped one danger, another is lurking right around the corner.
And then at the end of chapter 10, he's hit with those 4 options.
Yeah.
Follow the voices, face the thunder, hunt the echoes, and embrace the silence. I mean, talk about a nail-biter.
No.
Knowing Mike and everything he's gone through up to this point, how do you think he's processing those choices?
Well, I think it's safe to say embrace the silence is probably the least likely option for Mike right now.
You think so? Why not? I mean, he's been through so much. Wouldn't the idea of just retreating and, finding some peace be tempting?
It might be tempting for somebody else, but not Mike.
Okay.
His entire arc in Survive the Island has been about wrestling back control. He's not the type to just give up and passively accept his fate,
That's true. He's always been more of a fighter, even when he's making what seem like passive choices.
Except, remember his decision to isolate himself?
Yeah.
That wasn't about giving in. That was about taking what he perceived as control in this chaotic situation.
Yeah.
And his choice to wake up in Chapter 10.
Right.
That's the ultimate act of defiance against the island's influence.
Yeah.
So embracing silence would feel like a step backwards for him,
Right.
like surrendering to the very forces he's been fighting against.
Okay. I see your point. So that leaves us with follow the voices, face the thunder, and hunt the echoes.
Right.
Let's start with follow the voices.
Mm-hmm.
After weeks of isolation,
Yeah.
wouldn't the promise of human connection be incredibly alluring for Mike at this point?
Absolutely. It's a fundamental human need, and the island has been ruthlessly exploiting that need, by pushing Mike further and further into isolation.
Yeah.
Remember the whispers they preyed on his desire for understanding, for connection, even as they were manipulating him.
Right.
So hearing those voices in the distance must be like a beacon of hope, a potential lifeline back to sanity and companionship.
But he's also been burned before.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, his past interactions with other players haven't exactly been positive.
Right.
Will he be able to overcome that ingrained distrust?
That's the big question. Survive the Island is a masterclass in psychological torment, and one of the most effective tools it uses is the erosion of trust.
Yeah.
It makes you question every interaction, every motive, every alliance.
So even if he follows the voices, there's no guarantee of a happy reunion.
It could easily turn into another betrayal, another source of pain.
Exactly. And that's what makes his decision so agonizing.
Yeah.
He's caught between this desperate yearning for connection and this deep-seated fear of being hurt again.
Right. Okay, so Follow the Voices is loaded with both promise and peril.
Mhm.
What about Face the Thunder? What makes that option so appealing to someone like Mike?
I think it speaks to that core part of him that craves understanding, that seeks to confront the unknown head-on.
Hmm.
Remember, his first instinct in the game was to investigate, to gather information, to try and make sense of his surroundings.
He approached the island as a problem to be solved, a challenge to be overcome through logic and analysis.
So Face the Thunder is almost like a continuation of that initial mindset.
Yeah.
Instead of hiding from the danger, he's choosing to go right at it to try and understand the source of the island's power.
Exactly. It's a bold move, a risky move, but it's also a move that aligns with his character.
Right.
He's not one to just sit back and wait for fate to decide his destiny.
Right.
He wants to take control to make things happen.
But it's also incredibly dangerous. What if he's walking into something he can't handle?
Sure.
What if the source of the thunder is beyond human comprehension, beyond human control?
That's the gamble, right? And Survive the Island is full of gambles. Every choice you make is a roll of the dice.
Yeah.
You weigh the potential rewards against the potential risks, and you make the best decision you can with the information you have.
But I think in this case, there's something more to it than just logic and risk assessment.
Mm.
Remember, he's went through this intense experience of waking up,
Mhm.
rejecting the whispers. He's feeling empowered, like he's finally broken free from the island's control,
Totally.
at least partially.
Yes, that's a crucial point. Face the Thunder isn't just about seeking knowledge. It's
Yeah.
about proving to himself that he's not a pawn in the island's game.
Yeah.
It's about taking charge, even if it means facing the unknown head on.
So it's not just about logic. It's about pride.
Yes.
It's about reclaiming his agency in a world that's been systematically stripping it away.
Exactly. And that's what makes this decision so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not just a matter of picking the safest option or the most logical option. It's about understanding Mike's psychology,
Right.
his motivations, his deepest desires. It's about getting inside his head and trying to understand how he's weighing these incredibly complex choices.
It's almost like we're playing the game ourselves,
Right.
trying to anticipate his next move to predict the outcome.
And that's the magic of a truly great narrative, isn't it?
Yeah.
It pulls you in, it makes you invest in the characters, it makes you feel like you're right there with them, experiencing the story alongside them.
It's like we're all stranded on this island together,
Yes.
trying to make sense of the chaos, trying to survive. Okay, so we've covered Follow the Voices and Face the Thunder.
Mhm.
What about Hunt the Echoes? How does that option fit into Mike's potential decision-making process?
Well, Hunt the Echoes is an interesting one. It feels almost like a middle ground between the extremes of the other options.
It does, doesn't it? It's not as overtly risky as Face the Thunder,
Right.
but it's not as passive as Embrace the Silence either. It suggests a more cautious approach, a willingness to observe and gather information
Yes.
before committing to a course of action,
Exactly.
which, knowing Mike, could be a very real possibility.
Mhm.
He's always been more comfortable operating from the shadows, analyzing the situation before making a move.
Exactly. Remember how he spent those early chapters meticulously scouting the shipwreck?
Yeah.
Carefully avoiding contact with other players? That methodical, almost detached approach to survival
Yeah.
has always been a defining characteristic of his gameplay.
So Hunt the Echoes could be seen as an extension of that strategy.
Right.
Instead of rushing towards the voices or the thunder, he chooses to observe from a distance,
Yes.
to gather intelligence, to try and piece together the puzzle before revealing himself.
It's a smart move, especially given how much the island distorts perception and manipulates emotions.
Right.
By keeping his distance, he's giving himself time to process the information, to filter out the noise, to make a more calculated decision.
But it also carries its own risks.
Yeah.
While he's observing, the situation could change.
Sure.
The voices could move on, the source of the thunder could shift,
Yeah.
and he could find himself falling behind, losing precious time.
Absolutely. There's always a trade-off between caution and decisiveness, between gathering information and taking action.
Right.
And in a game like Survive the Island, where the environment is constantly shifting, where every moment counts, that balance can be incredibly difficult to strike.
It's like the game is designed to punish indecision, just as much as it punishes recklessness. You're constantly forced to make these impossible choices,
Yeah, I know.
knowing that no matter what you do, there will be consequences.
That's what makes it so compelling. It's a constant test of your judgment, your instincts, your ability to adapt to an ever-changing landscape.
Right.
And that brings us back to the core question.
Yeah.
What will Mike choose? What will Mike choose? Well, I think it's safe to say at this point, embrace the silence is probably the least likely option for Mike.
Yeah, you really think so? I mean, he's been through so much. Why not? Wouldn't the idea of just, retreating, finding some peace and quiet be so tempting at this point?
It might be tempting for somebody else, but not for Mike. I think his entire arc in Survive the Island has been about wrestling back control.
Okay.
He's not the type to just give up and passively accept his fate. You know what I mean?
I guess that's true.
Mm.
He's always been more of a fighter, even when he's making choices that look passive from the outside.
Remember back to his decision to isolate himself.
Oh, yeah.
That wasn't about giving in to the island. That was about him trying to take what control he could in a chaotic situation.
Okay.
And when we get to chapter 10 and he makes the choice to wake up, I mean, that's the ultimate act of defiance against the island's influence.
Right.
So to go back now and embrace silence, it would feel like a step backwards for him, like surrendering to the very forces he's been fighting against.
Okay, I see your point.
Mm.
So that leaves us with Follow the Voices, Face the Thunder, and Hunt the Echoes.
Exactly.
Let's start with Follow the Voices. Wouldn't the promise of human connection be incredibly alluring to Mike?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a fundamental human need, and the island has been ruthlessly exploiting that need, pushing Mike further and further into isolation.
Right.
Think back to the Whispers. They preyed on his desire for understanding, for connection, even as they were manipulating him.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So hearing those voices in the distance, it's got to be like a beacon of hope, a lifeline back to sanity and companionship.
But we also know that he's been burned before, right?
Yeah, true.
His experiences with other players have not been great.
Not great.
Can he really overcome that ingrained distrust?
That's the question, isn't it? Survive the Island is a masterclass in psychological torment, and I think one of the most effective tools they use is just the erosion of trust. It makes you question every interaction, every motive, every potential alliance.
So even if he chooses to follow those voices, there's no guarantee that it's going to be a happy reunion.
Right.
It could just as easily be another betrayal, another source of pain.
Exactly. And that's what makes his decisions so agonizing. On the one hand, he's got this yearning, this desperate yearning for connection. And on the other hand, there's this deep-seated fear of being hurt again.
Okay, so follow the voices is loaded with both promise and peril. What about Face the Thunder? Why would that be so appealing to somebody like Mike?
Well, I think it speaks to that core part of him that craves understanding, that seeks to confront the unknown head on.
Yeah.
Remember, his first instinct in the game was to investigate, to gather information, to try and make sense of the things around him. Like, he approached the island as a problem to be solved, a challenge that could be overcome through logic and analysis.
So Face the Thunder is kind of like a continuation of that initial mindset.
I think so, yeah.
Instead of shying away from the danger, he's choosing to go right at it.
Yeah.
To try and understand the source of the island's power.
It's a bold move, a risky move, but it's a move that makes sense for him.
Right.
He's not the kind of guy to just sit back and let fate decide what happens to him.
Right.
He wants to take control to make things happen.
But it's also, like, super dangerous, right?
Oh, yeah. Every choice you make is like rolling the dice. You weigh the rewards against the risks, and then you just make the best decision you can with the information you've got.
But I think in this case, there's more to it than just logic and risk assessment. Oh, yeah. He just went through this incredibly intense experience of waking up, rejecting those whispers.
Right.
He's feeling empowered, like he's finally broken free from the island's control.
Oh, yeah.
At least a little bit.
That's huge. Face the Thunder isn't just about getting information. It's about proving to himself that he's not just a pawn in this game.
Right.
It's about taking charge, even if it means facing down something terrifying.
So it's not just about logic then.
Right.
It's about pride, about taking back the agency that's been stolen from him.
Exactly. That's what makes this decision so fascinating.
Totally.
It's not just picking the safest option or even the most logical option. It's about getting into Mike's head.
Survive the Island. It takes a hard left turn into the metaphysical. It's like the island decided to turn up the psychological thriller dial to 11.
You're not kidding. You don't belong here.
Yeah.
The title itself is practically dripping with ominous foreshadowing.
Right.
What we're seeing now is the fallout from Chelsea and Peter's choices playing out in a very surreal, symbolic way.
Remember how they got swallowed by that weird engine?
Right.
Well, Chapter 10 drops them into these separate cloud spaces. Chelsea finds herself in a golden cloud. Peter's in one that's blue.
Oh.
Almost like they're facing different sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And the way these environments are described, it's as if the island is giving us a visual representation of their internal states.
Oh, interesting.
Chelsea's golden cloud is all warmth and light.
Okay.
But there's this undercurrent of regret, particularly about her role in Peter's predicament.
Yeah.
It's like she's being offered peace but can't quite accept it.
It's heartbreaking. But is she really to blame, or is this the island messing with her head?
Right.
Making her doubt herself. After all, she's always been the compassionate one, the one who tries to help everyone.
That's what makes it so compelling. We're seeing the weight of her past choices, especially around that staircase incident, really impacting her. And you have to wonder, is this guilt genuine? Or is it the island's influence, twisting her good intentions?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the fine line between self-preservation and sacrificing yourself for others, especially in a place like this island.
Yeah.
Where the rules seem to change with the tide.
And then there's Peter. His blue cloud is the polar opposite. Cold, still almost suffocating.
Oh, wow.
And he's surrounded by knowledge, but it's presented in this detached, almost clinical way.
It's a complete 180
Mm-hmm.
from how he started valuing logic and teamwork.
Right.
Now he seems totally resigned to the island's will, convinced that he was never really in control.
Right.
It's like he's traded his initial curiosity for a kind of cold acceptance.
And what's really chilling is that he's okay with Chelsea's apparent demise, convinced it was all part of the island's grand plan.
Wow.
This raises a fascinating question. At what point does adapting to a harsh environment turn into embracing its cruelty?
Right.
Is Peter truly in control, or has he simply traded one form of captivity for another?
It's almost like he's become the very thing he initially sought to understand, losing his humanity in the process.
Yeah.
And then comes the kicker. Both of them get hit with these bizarre tests.
Right. It's as if their experiences in the clouds were just the prelude to a much bigger challenge.
Okay.
Chelsea encounters a figure corrupted by these blue veins, clearly in pain, and Peter finds a creature ravaged by what's described as golden rot. It's like they're each facing a twisted reflection of the path they didn't choose.
So what do you make of this? Is the island deliberately playing with their minds, pushing them to confront their deepest fears and desires?
It's definitely not a coincidence. These tests are the culmination of everything they've experienced, forcing them to confront the consequences of their choices.
Right.
Whether real or imagined. Remember how Chelsea's always been about healing, about helping others?
Yeah.
Well, now she's presented with this figure that's literally falling apart. Will she try to fix it, even though it might put her own peace at risk?
And what about walking away? Is that even an option for someone like Chelsea?
It's tempting to say no.
Yeah.
But remember, she's carrying the weight of her perceived failures.
Right.
Choosing to walk away could be seen as a form of self-preservation, a way of protecting herself from further heartbreak, or maybe it's her finally accepting that peace
Yeah.
the golden cloud offered.
It's a tough call.
Yeah.
But either way, it feels like a turning point for her.
Absolutely. And then we have Peter, who's presented with this creature consumed by golden rot, the very thing that represents warmth and life in Chelsea's cloud.
Right.
It's like the island is offering him a chance to reconnect with those qualities he seems to have abandoned. But will he even recognize that opportunity?
Especially given his belief that the island doesn't tolerate weakness.
Right. His choices are the same, leave it, help it, or destroy it.
Okay.
But his interpretation is going to be completely different, filtered through this lens of the island's harsh logic.
Wait, but couldn't help it also be seen as a strategic move? What if Peter believes manipulating the golden rot could give him an advantage in this strange environment? It might not be about compassion, but about exploiting the situation to his benefit.
That's a great point. Peter's always been a bit of a pragmatist. Choosing to help it could be his way of playing the island's game, using its own rules against it.
It's almost like the island is presenting them with these moral dilemmas disguised as survival challenges.
And that's what makes Survive the Island so brilliant. It forces you to ask, what would you do in these situations?
Yeah.
What are your limits? And are you really as in control of your choices as you think you are?
It's unsettling, to say the least. But also incredibly thought-provoking.
And we haven't even touched on how their choices might affect the other players and the island itself. That's a whole other layer of complexity we need to unpack.
I'm already hooked. Let's dive into that. So we've got Chelsea and Peter facing these mirrored tests, wrestling with these heavy moral dilemmas. But let's not forget, they're not alone on this island. How do their choices impact the bigger picture? The whole collaborative game aspect of Survive the Island.
That's where it gets really interesting because remember, the island isn't just some passive setting. It's practically a character in itself watching, reacting to the player's every move.
Right, and the game's creator has hinted that the island doesn't tolerate weakness. So if Chelsea chooses compassion and Peter goes for destruction, are they somehow working against each other even though they're physically separated?
It's a fascinating question. Isn't it almost like the island is setting up this moral tug-of-war testing, not just individual players, but the group's overall capacity for good or evil?
Hold on, you're saying the fate of the island could hinge on whether the players, as a group, lean towards compassion or ruthlessness?
It wouldn't be out of character for this game, and remember, there are multiple ways to win Survive the Island. Some players might be laser-focused on escape, while others are more driven by uncovering its secrets. How do those competing goals play into this moral equation?
It's like the island is this giant petri dish, and the players are the bacteria, their choices determining whether the culture grows or collapses. Kind of a bleak analogy, but you get what I mean, right?
I do, and it makes you wonder, what's the island's endgame here? Is it trying to evolve to shape the players into something new, or is it just toying with them, watching them tear each other apart for its own amusement?
Okay, that's definitely giving me some creepy Lovecraftian vibes, but let's reel it back to the collaborative aspect. We've got players like Chelsea, initially driven by compassion, and then you've got those who are more self-serving, like Peter's become. How do those conflicting motivations play out in a game where you're literally fighting to survive?
It's a recipe for some serious drama.
So are we talking alliances, betrayals, maybe even a Lord of the Flies situation?
It's all on the table, and that adds this whole other layer of tension to the decision-making process. Do you help someone knowing they might turn on you later? Do you prioritize your own survival over the group's? These are the kinds of questions that keep you up at night, which I'm sure is exactly what the game designers intended.
You have to wonder, though, could there be strength in those contrasting approaches?
Mhm.
Maybe someone like Chelsea, who's more in tune with the emotional side of things, could balance out the ruthlessness of a player like Peter.
That's a really interesting thought. It challenges the assumption that a cutthroat, every man for himself approach is the only way to survive. What if true strength lies in finding that balance, that middle ground, where compassion and self-preservation can coexist?
It kind of makes you think about the whole survival of the fittest concept in a new light. Maybe it's not just about physical dominance, but about adaptability, empathy, and the ability to form meaningful connections, even in the most extreme circumstances.
Which brings us back to those mirrored tests. What if Chelsea and Peter's choices are somehow connected even though they're physically separated? What if one's act of compassion can somehow counteract the other's destructiveness?
You're blowing my mind here. So we're not just talking about individual choices, but about the collective impact of those choices on the island as a whole.
Exactly. Imagine the ripple effect if other players are faced with similar dilemmas, some opting for compassion, others for destruction. Could the island be testing the group's overall capacity for empathy? Or maybe it's looking for a specific balance, a certain ratio of light and darkness to achieve some unknown goal.
This goes way deeper than just surviving the island, doesn't it? It's about the choices we make as individuals, how they affect those around us, and ultimately what kind of world we want to create.
It's about recognizing that our actions have consequences both immediate and far-reaching, and that even in the darkest of circumstances, we always have a choice.
It's fascinating how Survive the Island keeps subverting our expectations.
Mm.
We started with this traditional survival scenario, and now we're diving into these complex philosophical questions about choice,
Right.
consequence, and the very nature of reality.
It's a testament to the game's depth. It's not just about escaping the island.
Right.
It's about exploring the human condition under extreme pressure.
Yeah,
And I think Chapter 10 really drives that home.
totally. Thinking about Chelsea and Peter and their wildly different reactions to these tests, it makes you wonder if the island itself is somehow manipulating
Yeah.
their choices, amplifying their pre-existing tendencies.
That's a really astute observation. Remember how Chelsea was always drawn to the island's mysteries, seeking knowledge as a way to protect the group?
Mhm.
Even her fascination with those glyphs, it stemmed from this belief in understanding as a means of survival.
And Peter, he was always a bit more individualistic, right?
Right.
Driven by this personal quest for knowledge, almost like he saw the island as a puzzle to be solved for his own benefit.
Exactly. And it's almost as if the island has taken those core aspects of their personalities and magnified them, pushing them to their extremes. Chelsea's empathy and desire to help have become intertwined with this overwhelming guilt, while Peter's logic and detachment have morphed into a cold acceptance of the island's brutal logic.
So are they even making choices at this point, or are they just playing out roles that the island has assigned them?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Are we truly free agents, or are we just products of our environment, our choices predetermined by forces beyond our control? It's a philosophical debate that's raged for centuries,
Yeah.
and Survive the Island throws it right in our faces.
Okay, so maybe we can't definitively answer that question.
Right.
But what we can do is analyze the potential outcomes of their choices.
Yeah.
Let's go back to those mirror tests. What if Chelsea decides to embrace the destructive power of the blue to stump it out, while Peter, defying his newfound cynicism, chooses to try and help the creature infected with gold?
Now, that's where things get really interesting, because if the island is indeed manipulating them, pushing them towards specific outcomes, then their acts of defiance could have huge implications.
You're saying it could throw a wrench in the island's plans?
Potentially, remember that vision they both witnessed in the void, the endless cycles of death and renewal? What if those cycles are dependent on a certain balance? a specific ratio of compassion and destruction.
So by making these unexpected choices, Chelsea and Peter could disrupt that balance, maybe even trigger some kind of unpredictable chain reaction.
It's definitely a possibility, and it speaks to the interconnectedness of everything on this island we're so used to thinking in terms of individual actions. But in Survive the Island, it seems like every choice, no matter how small, has the potential to create these ripple effects, impacting not just the individual player, but the entire ecosystem.
It's like the butterfly effect, but with existential dread and creepy island monsters.
Well said. And with that, we leave you to ponder the choices that lie ahead for Chelsea Peter and all the players caught in the island's web.
Until next time, keep those survival instincts sharp, and remember the island is always watching.